Okay, we're live.
Wow, well, we're here. So thanks to Jacqueline being able to use her expertise because the method we were trying just wouldn't work for us today. So, hey, I hope you can see us on this live stream. And if you can give us a little shout out, make sure you can tell us that you're here. Um, and you might be able to, yeah, there's a comments thing here. So you should be able to leave a comment somewhere. Maybe we can see them. So, we're all just doing this on the fly. And, Jacqueline and I had just had a 15-minute fantastic conversation before we realized we weren't live streaming. Life is just like fun. So, hi, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for being able to jump in and just do what we need. And tell us how your day's going.
It's a pleasure. Wow, I mean, I'm on the fly. This is how it works, and we just roll from one thing to another, and this is parenting. So I think that we are just the example of how to flow in our lives as parents with what we've just done right now. So I've had a great day. I've had a really busy day with my group program this morning, and I've been in session up until 5 minutes before we came on. So it's been a great day in my life supporting parents.
Yay, and I'm just grabbing my phone. Yes, I can see us. Look. Double checking. So wonderful. We are live and so exciting. So we were just talking earlier about, I love the way the summit works because I can see, as New Zealand is the first to see the sun in the morning, we get lots of New Zealanders on first and then the Australians and then in Asia, and you just see the sun coming up around the world as people start to join in. So there's so many who haven't seen your session yet, Jacqueline, which they still have a treat, and there's lots who already have. So it would be one of the comments which I absolutely loved was this idea of your DSD, do something different.
Yeah.
And so tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be the most transformational tool that I've experienced in my life. And it seems so simple, right? Oh, you just do something different. But to be able to do that, to be able to actually lift out of the kind of repetition or the patterns and the way that we do things when we're stuck in the traps that I love to talk about. And when you catch my session, you'll get a feel for those. Because we just fall into this repetitive, behavior of just kind of banging our heads against the same wall, and it just doesn't help. And to do something different is literally to flick the switch, to dance the opposite, to do the exact opposite end of the spectrum of what we have been doing. And as I was saying to you, Karen, when we were having our little intimate chat before we finally got on, which was, it seems counterintuitive to do something different because the behavior that our parents, modeled to us becomes so normal, and then we just repeat it. So, but in terms of being able to do something different, even though it feels counterintuitive, it just comes to such incredible gold in our lives as parents. And one of the quotes that I shared with you was a Henry Ford quote, which Tony Robbins also uses, which is simply, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. So if it's not working for you, simply doing something different, or to DSD, just opens the pathway. It opens your world up to allow these different choices and these different options to present themselves. So yeah, that's what DSD is all about.
And, I think sometimes as parents, we think if we push harder, if we nag more, if we, give more incentives, then something might actually change. But then I also wonder, who is the learner in this situation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when we do kind of get on that roll of, I'll just talk a little bit louder, and I'll make a little bit more noise, or I'll bring more punishment in, or, all of those kind of old ways, those old paradigm ways of parenting However, when we can actually open to being the learner, in this situation, in our lives as parents, it completely shifts things. It absolutely shifts gears, and it almost it opens up an invitation for us to get it wrong, for us to muck it up, for us to be able to fail forward. And that was another point that I touched on in our earlier conversation, which was when we can do that, when we can enable ourselves to try new things, because we don't need to get it right. And so often that is the way that's the piece that keeps us stuck. I want to get it right all the time. Therefore, I just keep on doing the same thing that has been normalized to me through my parents modeling their behavior. And then we can't make mistakes, we can't fail forward. And that's the way that I love to language it. And I remember seeing this video of Will Smith a long time ago, and he was talking about failing forward, and how when you can fail forward, you don't get stuck in the trap, you just keep moving. And the face slap, which is the most highly technical tool that I use, highly researched, it's been in labs for forever, simply just going, oh my God, I've so been in that trap, or I've so been banging my head up against the same wall, enables us to move forward. It's like, oh God, I'm in the trap, I can accept it, I can laugh about it, I'm flowing, I still have momentum, I'm not stuck beating myself up about it.
I think there's a lot of blame in that, isn't there? Because what I see is, I often hear couples say, "Oh, I wish I had a relationship like you have with your husband," and there were years that I used to just think, oh, I wish he would be better. I wish he would connect more. I wish, and then I realized one day that I was actually blaming him. It was his fault that things weren't right between us, and everything shifted and changed when I started to take responsibility and I started to do something about it. And so I started to buy him the flowers that I'd really rather have had, or I started to initiate the conversations, or say, hey, let's go to a movie, I started to do those things, little things like leaving a little love message on the shower door after I'd had a shower, and then he started doing the same, and I'm like, oh, and now it's just become part of what we do as a couple. But people haven't seen all the struggle that happened before, and it was me needing to do something different.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what it was. And I mean, I was exactly the same. I spent years blaming my husband for everything that was wrong in our relationship, finger pointing. And it took me a long time to realize that there were three fingers pointing back at me. And that as soon as I go like that and turn the whole thing around, that's the empowerment, right? Because I can change that. And there's so much in here around, wanting to kind of stay in that story, that sort of victim place of, oh, woe is me, it's all that other person's fault outside of myself, but it's so disempowering. As soon as I did the same as what you're saying and took responsibility, took ownership of like, how do I want my relationship to be? And then I bring that. I bring that to the relationship, and when that happens, everything changes. And it's one of the things that I talk about in my Pathways for Parenting program, which is creating a gifting economy in your relationship. And when it's a gifting economy, there's flow, there's movement. It's not just taking. And I think that a lot of the time when we think about relationships, and the way that I love to language it is that the relationship's not just me, it's not just my husband, if I'm using that as an example, it's the space in between. And if both people are just taking from that relationship, and of course this is relevant for any relationship, then it becomes depleted, it becomes exhausted and tired. So if we're operating within this gifting economy, creating a gifting economy in our relationships, then we're feeding it, we're fueling it, we're filling its tank. And even if we're not able to sometimes, because sometimes we're not able to, then it's like, hey, babe, I got nothing left tonight, and then the other person can take over. or we need to have some outside input to help fuel and feed our relationships. So yeah, there's a lot of blame. And I think one of the beautiful pieces in the work that I do is that when I talk about blame, it's part of our conditioning. You know, we're so blame each other. And when you look at just little pieces of thinking back to your childhood, and you know, someone broke a lamp, who did it? You know, it was automatically, it was, you know, it was you, or just finding someone to blame. And when we can start to get out of those cycles by bringing the ownership back to ourselves, you know, what can I take ownership for, and ownership for in every situation? Whoo, things shift. They really
Totally get that. I was just checking my phone again. Parents, if you're watching, if you've got any questions for Jacqueline, we're just going to keep talking. But if you've got any comments, I'm sure you can put them down in the comment box and we can see them as well. And I see that Todd says that Denzel Washington gave a graduation ceremony speech discussing failing forward. So that would be interesting to go and watch, because I think it is, that's been my platform for 26 years, about making mistakes and giving it a go and trying it, and how important that is for us to be able to do. So before we started on air, Jacqueline, we were talking about choice, and so tell us a little bit more about how we allow our children to have this choice.
Yes. Well, as I said, I was on the AM show earlier this week, which was great. I had a couple of days notice, and they're like, look, can you come in and talk? And I was like, cool. It's the topic was keeping teens safe at parties. So, you know, our teenagers that want to go out and have a good time and they want to socialize. And what I wanted to really leave people with from that conversation was choice. That if we can teach our kids about choice, we can empower them through choice, then it is a completely different ballgame, because let's face it, so many of us growing up felt like we didn't have any choice. We didn't have any say over our environment. You know, we were so contained, so controlled, so over-parented is what the language that I like to use. And I was a professional over-parenter in my early years as a parent. You know, my baby's socks had to match. Yeah, that's the level of control. And when I talk about choice, I am talking about being able to support our children and our young people in their choice, you know, not just telling them what to do all the time. And the two pieces that I gave in this very brief interview was stop telling your kids what to do and share what you did instead. Because it's almost like when we fall into the we parent from the past trap, someone pushes F10 delete and we forget all the stupid stuff that we did when we were kids. You know, when we were teenagers, it's like, oh yeah, you know, I had some run-ins with alcohol for sure. And, you know, that was what we were talking about. So in terms of choice, I love to talk about parent choice and kid choice. And the parent choices become very few and very selective. Of course, there's more when your kids are smaller, but they really don't have to be there in the way that a lot of parents out there are, you know, using choice in their lives as parents. You know, they want to control everything. So get really clear on what the parent choices are in terms of what's really important to you, and let the rest go. Let the rest go, and let your kids have more choice over what is happening in their environment. You know, the way they wear their hair, the way they keep their room. You know, all of these things that we sort of want to control so much. If we can allow them to have those choices and support them in it, apart from moldy food. I don't do moldy food in rooms. That's definitely one of my things.
Moldy food, I love it.
You keep the room how you like, but no moldy food in there. But what it does is that if we can support our kids in their choices, they're going to be way more open to honouring and respecting ours. And that is the big piece. Yeah, our few choices that are really important to us, they honour and respect, and they want to do they want to do better. They want to do what we've asked them to, because we're respecting and honouring theirs. And it's a huge piece.
Yeah, I remember my daughter at 16 wanting to, or maybe even 15, I'm not sure, wanting to dye her hair. And I'm like, absolutely not. I was 40 before I dyed my hair, and, this is not natural. No, it's a surprise, viewers. Yeah. But it was like, no, I was 40 before I dyed my hair. Of course you can't dye your hair. And then I realized that was my mother. And so I did some reflection, and I asked her why, and she talked about why she wanted to do that. And I said, okay, I'll help you. So I had no idea how to dye hair, but she bought the hair dye, and we learned together, and it was an amazing bonding experience, actually. And she's done that several times since. She's said, hey, I really like to do this. And I'm like, well, if you really made up your mind, then I'm happy to, we'll talk through the consequences. We'll talk through what it means. And now I'll be part of that decision with you.
Yeah. And, supporting her in her choice can open up those conversations of, what are the impacts and what are the benefits here? And those conversations just don't exist when we're just telling our kids what to do.
Mm. Yeah. And I was saying on the live launch party yesterday that I have 2 extra teenagers who have come to live with us during lockdown. So that's always an interesting experience when you have other teens who've come from other family environments. And all the girls were going to go camping a couple of weeks ago, and I got a whiff of a conversation that there was going to be alcohol. I knew that, but there was also going to be drugs. And I was like, okay, let's have a conversation. So we sat them down around the table and talked about it. And one of the girls made a comment that, I know my mum used drugs when she was young and she's fine. But we also had to talk about that drugs nowadays are very different to the drugs that we probably used 30, 40 years ago, and the impact on those. So it turned out they ended up not going. Not really sure what their reasoning was around that, but next thing I heard was, we're not going. So I just left it at that. But it's having those conversations, I think, is the really important part.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as I was finishing my interview with Duncan on the AM show, he said, but what about booze? What about booze? And what I really wanted to get into, and he had to wrap up because the sessions before us had run over. But what I'd said was, we need, as parents, as adults, we need to check in with our own relationship to alcohol and drugs, because that is what's informing, that is what our kids are absorbing, and they're either going to repeat it or react to it. And I think it's a really, really important one in terms of us in New Zealand, where we have a binge drinking culture. We absolutely do. And the way that I like to approach this is, like, in other countries, there is a completely different relationship with alcohol. Now, I'll use alcohol as the example, but in terms of, in France and Spain and, the other countries who have a much more social experience relationship to alcohol, where you're drinking at a very young age with your family, at the table. It might only be a little thimble of wine, but it's brought into the culture in a very different way. And here in this country, it's either, a stress relief. I have coffee to pick me up in the morning, and then wine to bring me down again in the evening. Or at the more extreme end of the spectrum, it becomes an escape. It's an escape to how I'm feeling. And it was
numbing, yes,
a numbing, and a mechanism to numb or to cope. And I always tell this beautiful story of when I was in Spain with my husband, and we heard this murmur, and we were, following around all the beautiful little back streets of the Spanish city, and we were following this hum, and it opened up into one of those beautiful squares, and there must have been at least 1,000 teenagers in that square, and they were having some drinks, and they were chatting, and it was just the most beautiful scene. And I thought, God, if this was in New Zealand, that'll be fitting, and we sort of had a little laugh about it, but also funny, not funny, right? So there's a big piece in there around checking into what your relationship with alcohol is as an adult, because I certainly didn't have a very healthy relationship with alcohol, for my years coming into being a parent. I have a much more healthy relationship with it now. And now I can have those conversations with my boys and say, look, guys, when it comes to the time, because my boys are a bit younger than your kids, but when it does come to the time when you want to drink, let's do it here. Yeah. Invite your mates. And this is what I mean about, okay, I'm going to support my boys in their choice to experiment and experience with alcohol, have experience with alcohol. And I'm going to set the conditions. I'm going to say, yep, I'm going to support you in that choice. And here's my conditions, because these are what are important to me, so that you can feel safe experimenting and experiencing the impacts of alcohol and the benefits of alcohol in a safe container, a safe environment. And the way that I wanted to add this piece into that very brief interview that I had, because they called it keeping kids safe at parties. And the way that I wanted to language it was empowering kids to feel safe at parties. Because otherwise it's just us taking responsibility for the children, for the kids, not empowering them to feel safe from within.
I don't know where I learned this, but many years ago we taught our children that if they were out, if they were at a party, if they were somewhere, and they called us or we called them, and we would ask the question, do you have sports practice tomorrow? And they knew it was a code question. So, do you have sports practice tomorrow? If the answer was no, it meant I'm fine, I'm happy, I'm safe. If the answer was yes, then we'd say, right, we're coming to get you right now. And so they could say to their friends, oh, mum or dad are coming to get us because I've got sports practice tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it kept their face, I guess. It kept them feeling okay with their friends, that they weren't like coming up. But it was a little code for us to be able to just check in on them and do it by text, do it by phone, whatever. But just a great way to be able to do that.
Oh, so, absolutely. And that kind of agreement, because that's an agreement with your child, right? With your, and it's beautiful, because that kind of agreement can't come unless you're supporting your kids in their choice to be doing what they're doing.
That's right. Yeah.
When we really get clear and think about it, we were doing most of that stuff too, and then we're trying to say don't do it because of our relationship to our own past. But what it's not doing, what it's not offering, what it's not inviting is empowerment for our own children, so that they go in with their eyes more open than what we did. Because let's face it, most of us were learning from our peers, not our parents, because those open, honest, transparent, vulnerable conversations about what our parents had experienced when they were our age didn't exist.
Correct. Yeah. It's interesting because I went to a party when I was 19, and I was late getting to the party, and what I saw was people that I knew very well, drunk, vomiting, kissing people they didn't even like, all of that stuff. And I remember ringing my father and saying, come and get me right now. And he came straight away, and I have never drunk since. And that was an interesting reflection for me at that time at 19. But it's been hard for my children, because I'm like, I don't have that experience. I chose very young, and partly because I know I have an addictive personality. I remember one year I had pumpkin soup every day for a whole year for lunch until I was sick of pumpkin soup. I have an addictive personality. So, I'm fine if I don't start, but if I start something, I might not finish. I might just keep going. So I understood that, but I don't necessarily have the experience. But I love what Julianne says from Canada here. She says, I was certainly more open to my second child. She's talking about the dyeing of the hair at 15 than I was at my first at the same age. And it makes me think about, you know, if you've got more than one child, 2, 3, 4, you know, the firstborn is the one we make all the mistakes on, or we're much tougher on, isn't it?
Oh, yes. They're the guinea pig, right?
Yeah. I have to say, I'm the eldest. Are you?
I'm actually the youngest.
Oh, okay.
I'm at the complete opposite end of the scale here. And so I had the learnings from all of my brothers, you know, and their experiences kind of passed down to me. So that was an interesting place to go to. And I also think it's really beautiful that you brought this in, because it is the other end of the spectrum where, you know, if a parent didn't have those experiences, then how do they share from that place? And that purely that vulnerability or that honesty, saying, well, look, you know, I didn't have those experiences where I kind of woke up in a gutter or, you know, snogging someone I don't even know. And, you know, I didn't have those experiences. And that's where my concern comes from, because I can't share what I experienced. So I think, you know, even though you didn't have go on to have those experiences, you can still share what you saw at that party. And you can still share stories that your friends have told you about their experiences with alcohol, and start to open up the conversations there. And I think that there's a beautiful piece that I want to lead into here, because when we can do that, and also when we can invite, you know, hey, I know Uncle Tony and he's had a big journey with alcohol, you know, I'd love to come and, you know, let's bring him into the conversation and he can share some of his experiences, because then it doesn't have to be you. And I think this is one of the biggest pieces of the We Put Our Kids First trap, which is one of the traps that I talk about in my session. When we fall into the trap that it has to be us, you know, that it has to be us doing all of the conversations and the support and the empowerment for our children, when we can bring these other adults in and bring these other stories, these other experiences, these other lenses, these other viewpoints, it provides this really rich kind of tapestry for our children to experience, to absorb from, and that is gold.
And I think the point there is, and what you're alluding to as well, is that you've got to have that conversation in the house, but you need a time and a place to do that. And so whether it's like, I don't know who said this, but children calling a family meeting because they know they want to have a discussion, or around the dinner table, or, you know, just providing opportunities for these kinds of conversations to happen, and be willing to have them and have those open, vulnerable sometimes conversations with our children, because that's scary, because I know sometimes I think parents, I've definitely been there myself. I want them to think that, you know, I know everything and I've got all the answers and I'm, you know, I'm the queen, but I'm not, and I don't know all the answers. And sometimes I just have to say to them, I don't know. Let's explore, let's talk. Yeah, let's ask somebody else. Let's find out.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the day where I said to my boys, you know how this is the first time you've been a kid? Well, this is the first time that I've ever been a parent, you know, and it was beautiful. It just opened up this vulnerability, that, you know, this transparency, this honesty, this humanness, you know, we're human here, and we're kind of ambling along, trying to figure things out together. And I think there's such beauty in that, because then it allows me to muck it up and get it wrong. It allows them to do the same, you know, without sort of self-judgment, which is another one of the traps I talk about, because otherwise they get stuck in that. And then there's this constant desire to try and get it right all the time, because we don't know, you know, and we can't know all of that. And I absolutely hear you, that perfectionist sort of drive to have it all together, to have it all sorted, to look like I know what I'm doing. And, you know, in parenting, I mean, every day is different. You know, you kind of think you've got it one moment and then it all changes, because your kids grow older, or someone's sick, or some new part of the dynamic comes into play. And it's absolutely 100% being able to roll with that, being able to jump on Zoom and have it not work, and here we are, we're still here because we've learned how to roll with it. We've learned how to be okay with whatever's happening around us, and that is the gift that I want to empower parents into. Because
I love that. Sorry.
When you can be there, you can parent your way through anything.
I love that idea of that this is the first time I've been a parent. I remember seeing a meme where a teacher says to a child, how old is your dad? And he says 10. And the teacher says, your dad can't be 10. And he says, he is, he's 10. And she goes, he's got to be older than 10. And he's like, no, he wasn't the dad before that. 10 years ago, he wasn't the dad. So he's a dad, he's 10. And so when you think about it that way, that's really cool to think about. I've only had X amount of years as a parent, not, X amount of years as a human being living on this earth, but X amount of years as a parent. I think that's a great way to sort of maybe reframe it.
Yes, and because we change so much when we become parents. We absolutely completely, I laugh about it, and it's the way that I language it when I'm working with clients. It's like, your pre-parent self and your post-parent self can be two completely different people. Because we
remember pre-parenting. So we've got a young, wonderful guy in our office, and he comes in the mornings and tells us he's been out for a picnic with his girlfriend, or been for a walk in the park, or they've been out for a lovely lunch and in the weekends. And I'm like, I don't remember any of that. 20 plus years ago. But my husband and I definitely planning the post-parenting. We're like, what are we going to do? Parents, I love my children. I'm just ready for them to go.
That's it. And that there's so much beauty in that acceptance. It's like, we love our kids to bits, and we also love, who we are as non-parents. When we can actually take that hat off. And I know that so many parents out there have real challenge taking off the parent hat. It's like, once they put it on, it's like all the other hats kind of disappear. It's like, who the heck was I before I became a parent? And my invitation is to find those hats, go into the back of the wardrobe and find those hats of who you were before you became a mum or a dad, and put them back on again. Because when we can do that in our lives as parents, we're living our passions, we're living our dreams, we're living who we are alongside being a parent, and we're inviting our children to do the same. We're inviting our children into that energy, into that yes energy for life, not just simply becoming a parent and that's all I am, and I see it everywhere. It's a huge
absolutely bit. And I don't know if it's necessarily going back and doing necessarily what you used to do. I was having a conversation with Stacey here in the office that I used to knit, and she looked at me and went, what? That's quiet and boring. And I'm like, yep. I used to knit jerseys as a teenager. I used to knit, things for my children when they were young. I used to do all that sort of thing. And she's like, but where's the loud, entertaining Karen? And I went, well, I have completely changed who I am, and I love who I am now. And so, yes, I was that maybe quiet person once upon a time, but now who I am and what I do is very different, and I've learned to love who I am now, and looking at what's next. What are those next stages? Who do I want to become now?
Yes, exactly. Who do I want to create now? That's, I think, a beautiful way of looking at it, a beautiful way of feeling into it, because I absolutely agree. I'm definitely not the person that I was before I had children, because I was invited to grow in these beautiful places that my children were designed to invite me into, by putting those exact buttons of where I needed to grow as an adult. So, 100%.
Jacqueline, as we begin to wrap this up, parents, if you've got any other questions, any comments, just write them in the chat box, because we're going to close this off really soon. It's always just lovely to hear from our listeners, to know, if you've watched Jacqueline's talk already, what kind of questions do you have? Did you see yourself in any of those parent traps? What was that? But there was one thing that you said in your talk that I absolutely loved, Jacqueline, and it was about that judgment, and that when we're judging others, it's really a judgment of self.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had another session on that, and we dug into it a little bit more, because who I was speaking to, she said, hang on, this is good. This is powerful. I want to dig into this. And it's a huge piece, because judgment trips us up everywhere as parents, and it feels like it's coming from outside of ourselves. But the thing is that unless there was truth in it, for ourselves, we wouldn't even feel it. It would be like somebody calling us a different name. Oh, but you're Mary. No, I'm not. I'm Jacqueline. No, you're Mary. No, I'm Jacqueline. And if there's absolutely no truth in it, then we don't feel it as judgment. It's like, yeah, whatever. Some guy just thinks I'm Mary. But as soon as somebody says something like, "Oh, you're a bad parent," then it's like, ooh, it's out. If there's any truth in it for you. And the beautiful part about this is that it's so empowering, because it means that we can take a little look-see that bit that the judgment that we've felt has gifted us, and then we can change it. We can.
I felt a huge guilt and shame at dinner recently when one of my children turned to me and said, "You're not listening." And I'm like, "No, you're not listening to me." And so I felt that whole judgment and had to go away and reflect, and went, yeah, maybe I'm not really listening. I was trying to get my own point of view across without listening to what they were saying. And it felt really uncomfortable, that judgment that I was getting from them. And it's like, what do you mean I'm not listening? Of course I'm listening to you. I'm just trying to give you my opinion. So parents, I want you to know we're all still a work in progress in this.
Yeah, absolutely. When and that uncomfortable feeling, I remember saying to a friend, I've learned to love getting triggered. And they were like, what? Because I know there's gold, just find it. And that's the gift. It's like, as soon as I get that feeling, it's like, that yucky, icky feeling, I know there's gold there. And it's like, okay, now I become a friend, she said, mining for gold. Then I can start mining for it. It's like, what's the gold in here? I'm going to find it, because that's the piece I'm interested in, because that's going to lessen the impact of the trigger the next time, until it doesn't even trigger me anymore, because I use the gold to find how I can empower myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Jacqueline, this has been an absolute pleasure just to have an extra chat with you. And I'm just grabbing my schedule, because I wanted to let the parents know when the next one is. Here's my schedule.
Love it.
So colourful. A3 piece of paper. 10:45 tomorrow New Zealand time, I'm going to be talking with Amy Scott. So hers is the first video tomorrow. You don't have to watch them in order, but it'll be up at 8 o'clock in the morning. And then 10:45, we're going to be talking about personalities and colours and a lot of exciting things. And so parents, thank you. And someone's just written, I can't tell who it is, but it's given me a lot of motivation to remember my passions and overfill my tank. So how beautiful. That's what we want for all our parents, right? To empower you to take your own power back and be the best that you can be, yourself, your parenting and relationships and everything. So Jacqueline, thank you so much, and we will look forward to seeing you again at a future summit, I absolutely know.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right,
I'm glad we could get on live.
Yay, thanks. Bye.
Bye everybody.